It's been a little bit more than a week since the release of Brighter Shores from Fen Research, and as I'm just happily idle cooking in the background, I thought this would be a great time to take a step back and look at the early access launch of Brighter Shores or evaluate how things have been, as a lot has happened in this first week, which in itself is pretty cool to say honestly. I think it's fair to say the first 2 days were fairly bumpy for Brighter Shores, as well it was probably one of the smoother MMO releases that at least I've been part of. Apart from 1 or 2 quick disconnects, I haven't really noticed anything annoying. But instead of connection errors and bugs, the source of early negative reviews were seemingly originating from a lack of meeting player expectations that were built to great heights up until the day of launch, causing Brighter Shores its early mixed review status. This should be no surprise to anyone considering the big shoes the game has to fill, with its core developers being the original creators of RuneScape. Despite Fen Research's best attempts at tempering expectations, saying the goal here is not to create another RuneScape, it is impossible really to not compare the two in any way. I've personally never played RuneScape, unfortunately. I'm very interested in doing so one day. I now have no basis of comparison, but I've only heard positive things about it, and from what I've seen, it's truly looking like a great classic D&D-esque experience that you don't really see elsewhere. So yeah, all I mean to say here is, harsh criticism and comparisons are very well expected in this case. Despite the ongoing review wars, Fen Research has immediately stepped up by releasing quick updates to the game due to player feedback, which was mostly for player controls and a total lack of key bindings, which they have added in 2 different patches in the first 2 days of launch. Quite commendable. I dare say, especially in today's gaming industry, it was refreshing to see such fast updates immediately, and don't get me wrong, the lack of these basic options was totally unacceptable even in an early access game. The main message I think these early patches sent out is that Fen Research is actively following player feedback and acts on it incredibly fast, which ultimately created a fantastic first impression for many that despite the lack of quality of life and features present, when the creator said expect rapid improvements, they weren't kidding. And I personally think this established trust between early players and the devs that only continues to improve a week later still. With all that said, the first shock and drama happened nonetheless immediately, as news spread about how the episodic system works and how the first impressions would lead to players thinking their progress is completely reset between episodes. As the panic somewhat spread among many, there was a dev announcement right the next day addressing the topic and the issue, explaining the breadth and depth system of Brighter Shores and how the episodic structure works, aiming to keep new releases on the same level of 0 for everyone no matter your playtime, solving an age-old MMO problem, but still offering depth for those who want to grind older professions, which will very much stay relevant. While this message might not have appealed to everyone, I think it had a similar message as the rapid early patches did. Fen Research is actively listening and responds fast to player feedback, and in this case, it was once again really refreshing to see a wall of text directly from a developer explaining things that at first glance didn't go through an army of HR reps before releasing, and it just felt like a normal message from another player for both the positives and the negatives with a sense of stubbornness. In the end, whether the episodic system is good as it is or not remains to be seen. Both sides seem to have very strong opinions on the matter, and there might be some unhealthy stubbornness present too, but if I've noticed one thing, what Andrew Gower said, that according to their early initial tests, once you get used to it, it eventually gets quite fun, seems to be somewhat accurate. More and more player feedback is saying the exact same thing, and after around 50 hours of game time, it's starting to grow on people. For my own opinion here, I'm probably not the best to ask, as I just don't care about this matter that much. My problem lies elsewhere, that I don't feel combat being different in the separate episodes, and that there's not enough goals for me to grind individual skills. I know the game is in early access and likely in alpha stages, but if I have any feedback, it's that I would love to see more exciting quests with actually good rewards that encourage you to do the different skill grinds and offer a sense of adventure. Currently, it feels more like grinding for the sake of leveling only, and there are no real goals you can set for yourself apart from a couple of them like building the monument or getting a cape, but there hasn't been a lot of "that's really cool, I want it too" moments. Regardless, the early days of Brighter Shores remained exciting as there was an update every single day, including bug fixes that now improve the game's review status already to mostly positive. Criticism and feedback kept flowing in quite steadily, still mostly about the lack of quality of life for basic features like camera options or lack of key bindings that would just make the game more tedious or unfun to play, like having to click 2 or 3 times for every action you want to do or before initiating combat on a monster. The very first major quality of life update was the ability to move around clicking on the minimap, which might sound like a side grade that just offers more control over time, but I think by now everyone can agree it proved to be a significant upgrade to the game, and especially grinding more efficiently for longer periods of time. This upgrade was later increased even further to be able to move 2 rooms away on the minimap, which I think offered the greatest improvement for gathering professions, or even cooking that I do now, where movement is pretty much the only activity I need to do between actions, and being able to click 2 rooms away makes it that much more of a pleasant activity. And I've heard someone mentioning therapeutic activity, which I would agree with. Having an efficient way of grinding feels oddly satisfying and relaxing. Shortly after this, on the 12th of November, just a few days after launch, another major quality of life option has been released, with the main option of adding the much requested single-click actions in the game. This allows us now to left-click on anything in the game for a quick default action like picking something up, crafting, or to attack a monster, which might seem like another trivial thing, but when you play a point-and-click game, having to repeat too many clicks between actions is one of the worst things that can happen, and this single update has increased at least my personal enjoyment of Brighter Shores by a ton. And do note here that most of these have been a direct result of player complaints of the game that developers listen to, which just proves how important it is not to silence criticism to a game, and a good studio is very well capable of filtering feedback themselves and act on them if they can or care. For this purpose, there's also been further direct communication on Andrew Gower's Twitter account, where there was a public vote for players to choose what they would like the devs to focus on next, quality of life patches, bug fixes, or new features, where quality of life and new features got the most votes that now everyone's eagerly awaiting. Based on current activity and the frequency of patches, understandably a lot of people are very enthusiastic and excited to see how future patches will look like. Now there are many different views on all of this. Is this a positive or underwhelming start? And I even agree with some of the more critical comments on previous news that none of this is really huge, as most of these options and quality of life should have been in the game day 1 of early access. Very true and fair. But that's also where our opinion greatly differs, and the importance of all of this lies in my view. Brighter Shores launched a promising game with very good foundation smoothly, with pretty much zero advertising, with only 7 developers if I'm correct. Apart from the expected and normal launch decline of player numbers, it is maintaining a stable player base, and most importantly, it showcases a strong level of communication between the developers and its players. Despite the arguable shortcomings in quality of life options or features, no one can argue that most of these options that should have been included from the start, or the ones players were asking for to be included, have now been added and are present within just a week. I think the key focus here is the rapid improvement of the game in such a short time span. It's impressive that within the first week of launch I can make a video like this to discuss exciting changes and progress that have significantly improved the player experience, and this is very rare nowadays. All in all, Brighter Shores is in early access, some even call it alpha state, and that's exactly what it feels like. In recent years, many games have deformed our views of what early access or beta means, and they've just become another marketing phrase or trick for companies to earn more money, and thus lost their original meaning. With Brighter Shores, I really feel what it means to be in early access and that players are directly affecting the development of this game, and to me that's exciting to be part of so early, and it feels like worth being part of so early. It is nowhere near in perfect shape, nor is it a finished game. So if you don't like it now, it's all good and it's okay to take a break and come back later. Many will do so, I'm sure. But as it stands now, even as it will eventually slow down to only weekly updates, let's say, I can't help but feel excited every day on how the game will be shaped moving on and how an actual big patch will look like. Because already in just 1 week, Fen Research has proved a level of commitment and care for the game or its player base that resonates with me as a person. And now I also want to see the game carry on, improve, and if the final vision is fun and good, then see it succeed.